Hello! Hello everybody! Welcome back for another time on the alternative controller that was a good start. I was like, okay, this is the one. I was like, this is the one time I'm not going to begin by going, "Can you hear me? Can you hear me?" And I mess up the beginning. So maybe this is a learning experience. Every week's a learning experience. But hello everybody, and welcome back once again to the Beyond Screens Alternative Controller Show. My name is Alistair, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Tatiana.
Hello. And yeah, in this show, we invite creators of alt-controlled video games to tell us about their work and show us what they're working on.
So, for those of you who may be new to the world of alternative controllers, these are video games made to be played using unusual custom-made controllers. So, for example, a game might be controlled using a door stopper, or an electric guitar, or maybe even a paper shredder. Or perhaps the creator might come up with a totally new object made by soldering together electric components.
And today's guest is Julia Makivic. Julia is a game designer and creative technologist who divides her time between London and Belgrade. Right now, she's in Belgrade, Serbia. She creates web-based narrative games and alternative controller games, which explore what it means to have an emotional exchange with a computational system and how our emotions are mediated by technology. And before we welcome Julia to the stream, let's take a look at one of her projects to give you a feel for her work. And this work is Ghost Boy in the Land of the Dead.
So, let's welcome to the stage our guest for this week. It's Julia. Julia, welcome.
And hello. Hi, everyone.
How are you doing?
Good. Yeah, how are you guys?
Doing well here myself?
Great. Yeah, great. Well, thanks so much for joining us. It's really a pleasure to have you. How is the weather in Belgrade right now?
So up until today, it was pretty much sweltering. But yeah, there was a huge downfall of rain last night, and it's actually kind of chilly. It's why I'm wearing a sweater. But it's welcome, honestly. Like this summer was just too hot, so I'm kind of glad that it's cooled down a bit.
Lucky you, friends didn't have that chance.
Oh.
So so you know the drill because we know you watched the show before. So we are gonna go through your evolution as an artist, basically. But before that, maybe you can talk very quickly about Ghost Boy, the game we just showed to the viewers.
Yeah. So Ghost Boy was a game that I made for my final thesis at Goldsmiths University for my MFA in computational arts. And basically, it's a story about a ghost that's caught in the afterlife and is having an existential crisis. He doesn't really want to go into eternity. He wants to remember what it was like to be alive. So you use the controller, which his immortal remains, his ghost body, and you contort it and twist it in order to let him move through the afterlife and eat various ghost burgers and strong, flavorful things in order to make him remember what it was like to be alive.
That's so cool. We'll come back to it because there is a lot to say about this game and even your MFA at Goldsmiths, actually. But let's come back to, let's say, the beginning. So based on your on our researches, the researches we did on about you online with Alistair, you you did some basically narrative design, arts and sciences, mainly computer sciences. So this is your academic background, and you. It's something that is really obvious, like narrative design is something that is a lot in your work, which is not common for ALT control.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, but
go on. If you have something to say, I mean, you are the guest.
Sorry. Yeah, for sure. Basically, yeah, I do like. I know that I'm sort of unique in the ALT controller world because I do tend to have a narrative twist on a lot of my pieces, which in general, a lot of ALT controller games focus on the mechanics and purely just the experience of interacting with the weird thing in front of you. But I try really hard to have mine embedded with some kind of story and have the ALT controller be a way of entering the story world of the game and having the material aspects of the controller immerse you in that world.
It's not a surprise. So when we did the researches on you, it wasn't really a surprise to hear this because two things are really striking in your work. One is the narrative design twist, or even actually just narrative design and how you include alternative controllers inside narration, storytelling in general. And the second one, which is actually the first thing that is striking, is that you have a really strong visual identity. Like your work is really consistent, visually speaking, whether it is for the object design or the graphics in general. And so we saw that you're actually coming from a comics and illustration background. So that's something that you did before starting alternative controller games. Am I correct?
Yeah, in a sense. So I was actually, for most of my life, I wanted to be an illustrator and a comic book artist. And then when I was in college, I wanted to study art, and my immigrant parents were like, no. So, they were like, oh, there's this degree in your school that lets you combine creative stuff with computer science. And so it seemed ideal. The computer science bit was honestly a struggle for a while. I actually nearly failed my first ever computer science class. But yeah, that was like a very reluctant approach to actually approaching computers at all. So yeah, for the most part, I always viewed myself as this creative person, and specifically just geared towards illustration and that kind of thing. So yeah, I always enjoyed using vivid colors and having sort of like a pretty recognizable visual style. And I tried to bring that to my I guess technological / computational work as well.
Yeah, that's so something that is interesting is that on your portfolio, every game is actually accompanied with some concept arts and visuals that are not necessarily inside the game or something that players will see, but that's basically, as I understood, your creative process. This is how you come up with ideas.
Yeah.
Among other
definitely
things.
I definitely have to sketch it out first in order to understand what it will look like. So the concept art is huge. It's I sort of want to see how it looks like in an illustration first in order to understand it, and then I try and bring it into 3D.
And so yeah, to after this, so you did narrative design at the MIT, some MIT classes, then BA in media arts and science. This is where you did the computer sciences you were talking about a few minutes ago. And then you did this MFA in computational arts at Goldsmiths. And this is where you started ALT control, or yeah, okay. So this is where you went physical with your creation, or more physical. What put you on that path?
Basically, it was the first ever time that I was able to do any real physical computing. And once I tried it, I really, really enjoyed it. I felt like it was bringing a life to these things, which I previously thought, okay, they only existed in a screen. Because when you I really like the unique entry point it can give you into experiencing a story or a game. So that's what drew me to it. I thought like, okay, you know, with these sort of sensors and controllers, you can literally make anything, and I thought that was amazing. And that I guess when we think of technology and computers, we generally think of something that's very uniform, like an Apple laptop, just, you know, a rectangle. And I thought, wow, computers can be anything. So I just really leaned into it, and I wanted to see as far as I could as far as I could push that that direction creatively.
So this was between 2017 and 2019. So yep. I guess, and the two, I'd say, most famous games you made, at least the two first ones I heard of, were made in 2018. So with my genius mind, I assumed it was all made during this period, which makes sense. I'm talking about Void of Memory and Ghost Boy, which are the two first projects we'll talk about, because there is so much to say about this. And the first thing I'd like to mention is that another thing that is striking about your work is that you do some iterations on the same project, but you show all the iterations on your website, which is not something that common. A lot of people will try to hide the first iteration, first prototype, and you seem to see this as a part of the work, the way it evolves. Is it something that you did on purpose, or did it just happen and you decided to put it all on your website?
So in terms of the actual iterations, that's something which does happen on purpose. Basically, I try different ways of making a thing. And when it came to Void of Memory specifically, I was looking for what was the most durable, because the cases collapsed over time just because I had to move them from one venue to another. And so that was mostly me trying to find what was the most travel-friendly case. It actually never ended up becoming a travel-friendly game. It basically collapsed at the end, but you live and you learn, I guess. But
maybe we should explain how Void of Memory is working, because we are talking about it like it's obvious and everyone knows it, but some people may not have heard of it. So can you describe a bit what's happening in this ALT control game narrative experience?
Yeah, so Void of Memory is supposed to represent a futuristic server that's made out of organic material. And it's kind of like a large pink box with a lot of embellished details onto it. And it's got a lot of extensions coming out of it, like, you know, long cords and tendrils. And those are sensors which you can use to interact with the server. The box itself has a little screen which outputs text and occasionally images. And then when you interact with the sensors and things sticking out of it, you can make decisions in the game, and your decisions are reflected in the screen. And the case itself is made out of laser cut acrylic. It was powered by an Arduino Mega, and it went through having a bunch of different sensors, from infrared altimeters, tilt switches, and conductive touch sensors. So yeah, it went through a few different iterations where I tried different ways of interacting with it. Yeah, that led to the final one, which ended up getting shown at a few places.
And Can you give us some example of how people interact directly with the story? Because we have all the interactions that are possible, but some actual situations in the game that are happening.
So in this server, so you're when you play Void of Memory, you're approaching it as an employee who works for this futuristic server farm that may or may not have some morally ambiguous applications. So there are some. So basically, you're learning how to you approach the server as an employee who is kind of going through a tutorial on how to use it. So little by little, it introduces you to how the server works, and you make decisions on how and if you should surveil people, which the server claims you should surveil. And eventually, as you become familiar with the system, you can decide whether or not you want to keep surveilling people. And there's an eventual character that kind of hacks the system and introduces themselves to you and can kind of basically, it gives you an opportunity where you can either completely subvert the surveillance system and help this character get revenge on the server, or you can just keep going about as you're supposed to, just surveilling random people that the server tells you to surveil.
How do you use alt control and physical interaction to enhance, if I can call it that, the interactive storytelling?
I think it's mostly through, I guess, the material, like the material aspects of like, okay, I think it's just seeing this strange interface and being able to touch and move it around in a particular manner just puts you straight into the middle of the story in a way that I think just a regular keyboard would, because with the Void of Memory, at least, you had this big ornate interface, and you actually did have to learn how to use it and follow the instructions. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to play the game. So there's this element of like this learning curve that you have to overcome, which sort of matches the learning curve of the character in the game as they're trying to decide what they would like to do with the system.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised with this, how it helps immersion. And also what's interesting is that you could have went for something that really looks like a regular server, but we can feel your aesthetic, like your artistic aesthetic in it, which gives a mood to the whole vibe, to the whole experience that is quite unique. Like it's so much Julia Makivic. I don't know how to call that otherwise, but it feels so much like you. That's really interesting. So, as I said, you documented 3 iterations of the installation. What's the difference between first iteration, then the second one, then the final one, the third one?
Okay, so the first one was basically it had a very nice laser engraved case with a cool pattern, but it was just unable to be transported anywhere. I took it to this venue and it just fell apart. It was not stable. So I guess in terms of components, I actually barely even remember what the story was with that one, but it was like a very, very rough version of what the final Void of Memory was supposed to be, of like, okay, here's this interface that you're supposed to be interacting with, but the characters themselves and the story itself was much, much more sparse. But you could, but it used slightly different controllers. It used an altimeter, which you could lift up to indicate something, or it had some buttons. But overall, it was just not very stable, and I ended up going for something else. It was like it was my first time working with acrylic, and I didn't really know how to construct something well. So I just very much leaned into the aesthetics, but the reality was that this was not exactly a stable game. So and also the interaction was very unclear at that point. It was my first time designing that sort of interface, and people just didn't really know how to use it without a lot of nudging. So yeah. But I liked how it looked, so I saved the pictures, and I described my process and how I made it. Also, I guess I made this portfolio site when I was still looking for jobs, so I wanted to highlight all the different sensors I knew how to use in case employers are interested in hearing this. So, yeah.
That's a smart move.
And what's the difference with because it's not I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are still working on it in the sense that it's an evolving piece for you, right? It's not something that is final and that's all.
Yeah, it's still evolving for me. Right now, it is very much broken and in a box in my attic. But I guess I would like to one day come back and do something else with the case and maybe rebuild it. I don't know if it'll ever be in a state where I can take it to shows again, at least not that particular version. But I think the themes that I explored in the games, like the ideas of ubiquitous computing, embedded technologies, and their potential for an artistic medium, ideas of isolation and connection when it comes to how we interact with technology. Those are all themes that I would like to keep exploring. And one day I will probably return to the same, to the specific story that's in Void of Memory as well. But right now I've moved on to other things. I'm taking a short hiatus. So it's kind of, it's always there, even though if I'm not necessarily working on it, but it is something which I will probably come back to at some point.
Yeah, this theme of isolation, connection, how you convey emotions through a device, a physical device, electronics, is something that is even more obvious in Ghost Boy in the Land of the Dead. At least when you just look at the video, what you were looking for with emotions is a bit more obvious. So I have to admit, the moment I saw Ghost Boy for a controller for the first time, it really reminded me of the controller, the console in Existence by Cronenberg. And I love that feel. Like I was so happy to see that someone went for that silicone organic vibe. And that's something that, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but two things are really striking in your visual identity: the colors and the shapes. So for the shapes, it's very organic. You can feel that a human made it when it's graphics, etc. And for the colors, it's very colorful, pastels, etc., which give it that really Julia vibe. And I was wondering, how do you come from the illustration, the concept art, to the final controller? Do you just draw it? Do you have some pipeline, a creative process for that?
Let's see. So I guess I will draw it as some sort of sketch, and I never really expect to stick 100% to the sketch. It's always the sketch mostly just illustrates a feeling, like a vibe of what I'm going for. And then I guess as I'm building the case itself, a lot of it is, I guess first I just have to figure out like what sensors I'm working with and what controllers, what boards, and then to see how I can best fit all of those into the controller. And it's a process which kind of informs itself. It's sort of like a little bit of a loop where I have a base circuit that I'm working with, and then I try to make that fit a material, and then to make the circuitry fit the material, depending on, I guess, how things go and what sort of limitations I end up reaching. So it's something which kind of, it doesn't necessarily have a defined structure, but it's just a little bit of an iterative process that happens across various prototypes of low fidelity and then to eventually higher fidelity, where I kind of try and work with the limitations of the material and with the actual, like, I guess, circuitry of the controller to see how I can make something that's engaging, but also not, but also functional and easy to transport, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it's really hard. There is a lot of friction between the, I don't know if I can call that a form of rigidity. Like, it's really rigid technology. I mean, it's really rigid. Like, there are many things you cannot do. You have a lot of constraints. And when you come from art in the sense of art and craft, in the sense of plastic art, fine art, visual art, you have a lot of confrontation between those two, which makes it really hard to mix smoothly and blend it correctly, like the organic feel and the computational technical part of it. And that's what's really interesting in your work also. But maybe we should explain a bit what Ghost Boy in the Land of the Dead is again, because we mentioned it really quickly at the beginning. Basically, it's a text adventure of some sort. And yeah, maybe you will explain it better than I will. Go on.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, it is definitely a text adventure in some sense. It's almost like, it's not really a platformer. No, that's not the right word. But it's like, it's a sort of a ghost-shaped controller that's got some tilt switches in there in each of the arms, and you need to control the position of Ghost Boy on the digital screen using this controller. So I guess you need to eat a certain amount of ghost burgers. So it's more like, I want to say like a weird unhinged joystick, basically, that you contort in order to, I guess, consume a bunch of objects that are on the screen. And it's definitely a visual novel that you also kind of like control using this controller. You have to move specific arms and things in order to get from one part of the story to the next in certain areas.
So
we have a technical question about this, which I think fit the topic. So someone in the chat is asking about the technical side of how the silicon controllers work. Is it joysticks? So from what I understood, there are some Arduino joystick happening under the silicon part, or is it some black magic? So that's the actual question we have.
I wish. But in no. So in each of his little arms, there's a tilt switch, which is a sensor which tells you whether it's upside down or not. It's basically like a button where if it's upside down, I guess it depends on the sensor. That means that there's a little ball inside that's touching the top of the sensor, right? If it's upside down, then that means that the switch is on. If it's right side up, the ball is on the bottom. It's not touching anything at the top, and then that means it's off. Or it could be the other way around, I guess, depending on the sensor. I could be wrong about this, but really it's like a button. Like, is it on or is it off? And I embedded one of those in each of his arms. So if like the arms are facing a certain direction as you're holding it, right, then the tilt switch will be off, right? But if you move it to this side, then it's on. Because the ball moved down. So it's like, so it's kind of like that. So if both of the arms are on, then he moves in this kind of direction, or like, I think he moves forward in both the X and Y axes, but if they're both up, then he just stays the same. Or if he just moves one arm, then he's only moving along the Y axis. So it's that kind of thing.
That's awesome. Like you use physics to give an organic feel, basically. So it's all binary, but all based on the movement of a ball inside of it. So physics is giving actually a big organic feel to it. That's brilliant.
Yeah, so I kind of struggled with this when I was making Ghost Boy specifically, because I sort of wanted to use different kinds of sensors. Like I originally was experimenting with bend sensors in the arms, but they failed really, really quickly, because if you work a bend sensor too much, then it just, forget about it. But and I was like, okay, I'm trying to make this game with this organic technology, and you're playing with Ghost Boy's organic flesh. Sorry, that sounds so weird. But I should use sensors that have an organic feel. So I'm going to take these analog sensors that can detect all this nuance and use it as mechanics in my game. And then I realized, like, no, just take these digital sensors, especially because it was being run on a Raspberry Pi, which is kind of like, it uses GPIO, which is more oriented towards digital inputs anyways. So it's easier. It was easier. It was easier that way. So I just was like, okay, there's a way that I can fudge this to make it look strange and interesting, but really I'm just using an on and off switch in each arm as the controller. And I actually did that with Void of Memory too. I went through so many more complicated sensors in the previous versions, from that altimeter to infrared, which was honestly a disaster, never again, to two other kinds of sensors. And then in my final version, everything that I had, all those ornate looking extensions coming out of it, basically they're just really elaborate on and off switches. And I was like, okay, this is a signal which is easy, that I can control, that's easy to detect, or if someone gets it wrong, it's easy to send them a message. So like when working with these alt controllers, it was like, okay, how can I make these switches, just these basically like these button interactions, interesting and disguise them as something else that conveys this more complex interaction, or like that creates the illusion like you're interacting with this much more complex system.
That's a real like, of course, the organic feel is really cool, and visually it's really appealing. The problem is when you interact with a game, at some point players need to know if their action has been taken into account, and you need some a degree of control on what you're doing, which can be contradictory with the organic feel of an analog anything, actually, joystick or flex sensor or whatever. And so, yeah, you can toy around like with rigid body, for example, so bodies that will be all smooth on screen. But the moment you need to make a game with it, it could be a real problem. And so making the feel organic, but the inside, the electronic part, really more binary and such, is a good way to approach this, definitely. We have a question in the chat, but
yes. No. Let's ask the question. So this is from Tommy K Extreme, who asks, is there a message or theme behind the dystopian future that Ghost Boy is set in? Is it linked to why he eats burgers?
Oh, good question. So yeah, like, I don't know if Ghost Boy is set in a dystopian future. He might be. I definitely have a few themes of that in there. Like, I guess, the Land of the Dead is a little bit based off of like a dystopian sort of psychedelic socialist landscape that like is a theme in a lot of my art. But it's like, I don't know if that, like, there's not like any real deep political message behind that imagery. It's just something which sort of like is a backdrop to a lot of my work, because that's the kind of stuff I grew up with. But now in terms of him eating burgers, it's mostly just him trying to remain, trying to remember what it's like to feel alive, to feel anything in this space that kind of wants him to disappear and to become nothingness.
I think that's really interesting how you like, you've got this character who is trying to remember how to feel, how to feel physical sensations, and then you are bringing in the players into this physical sensation of touching this controller that is quite strange and perhaps unsettling to hold in their hands. And I kind of like, having read through your website, you talk about how the game was kind of designed to kind of I guess conjure up emotions in the player, and that you were using vibrations and things to do that. And I guess, like, I'm kind of curious to know, like, did you discover something about the way people process and understand emotions through this? Did that come up in people's play?
A little bit, so it's mostly funny. So I actually had a chance to show it at Game Happens in Italy, and that was kind of the main venue where people were able to interact with it. And I sort of had like a whole host of people who weren't really familiar with games or like creative tech in general see it. So it was at this games venue where there were a lot of, I guess, like this indie games show in Italy, where there were a lot of they had this open exhibition day, and a lot of people, families with little kids, came and stopped by, and I don't think any of them were necessarily familiar with alt controls or necessarily like mainstream gaming in general. So it was interesting to see their reactions, and it was mostly anger and frustration, because Ghost Boy is actually a very hard game that only I know how to play well. But like people can learn it over time, obviously, but it is kind of, it takes a while to get used to how the arms move and how to bend them in just the right way in order to get them to move. So there's a lot of frustration. Some child ended up punching Ghost Boy a few times.
I guess it's good he's kind of got a jelly consistency.
Exactly. And it was actually interesting. So there was this this grown man who came and played my game, and honestly, it was just not going well for him. and I was there, and he just turned to me and he was like very visibly pissed. He's like, okay, but like this isn't going, like how do I play this? And then he does something and it doesn't do the right thing, and then he leaves Ghost Boy alone, and then the way the arms are tilted, with the things that work inside the physics, he ends up going in the right direction. He's like, oh great, a game that just does something when you don't touch it. Amazing.
So much soul.
Yeah, exactly. But then afterwards, he can't, and I was like, okay, well, this dude had a bad time, but whatever. Like, it's a venue with a lot of people. Like, not everyone is going to be into it, and that's totally fine. But then he comes back, and then he starts taking pictures of it, and I'm like, okay, so this, like, even though you hated this, clearly, it must have struck something with you because you're coming back. So,
love-hate relationship spotted. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's art. I mean, that's art too, and the feeling of taming the beast or an animal is actually part of the experience, I guess.
Yeah, it's definitely like a whole. I find that, so for my master's thesis, I had to research kind of like the history of controllers and games, and also a little bit about like the history of alt controllers. And there's this kind of dichotomy between I guess certain aspects of the alt controller scene where the controller is just a new means of interacting with the game, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a game that you have to beat, or a controller that necessarily you sort of have to figure out how to use. It's just something that you can interact with and something happens. But in traditional game systems, the idea is that you want to beat the machine, figure out how the computer works and beat it. And alt controllers oftentimes, produce an alternative to that, where it's mostly just means of interacting with something, or it lets you interact differently with this computational system, and it doesn't necessarily have to result in winning. You don't need to understand it. You don't need to understand how it works necessarily in order to enjoy it. And yeah, there's this thing where like, yeah, so they find this game that's very difficult to interact with, but I guess there's this element of frustration that comes up when they realize that they can't necessarily beat this system or beat this game that easily. And that's an interesting, I find that's an interesting source of friction to play with sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, in alt control, the controller is not all about ergonomics, and it's more about the friction that will make the game experience happens actually. So, I mean, it's normal to use a controller for that in alt control. That's the whole point. This is why the Ghost Boy story you just told us is fantastic. And Ghost Boy also had 3 iterations, just like Void of Memory. So maybe you can tell us a bit of what happened in the first prototype, the second one, and the final version.
Yeah, so basically with Ghost Boy, it wasn't so much any major revolution in the story, but it was mostly me trying to figure out how to get the silicone to work and how to build my controller. So I went through a few cardboard prototypes where I was using capacitive paint as the input, just to see how, like, and just familiarizing myself with certain controllers. As I mentioned, I was experimenting with bend sensors at a certain point. And I was, I guess just trying to combine capacitive touch as well. Still working with that analog input, trying to see what I can do with it. And then in the other, and the case originally itself was made out of cardboard, just a very quick, fast, fast solution for a demo. But I knew I wanted to eventually build a more robust case for it. And then later on, it was mostly just, okay, I learned how to cast the silicone in this 3D printed case, and how to embed the controllers in a way that they won't tear it as easily, or that they won't break. So the iterations are mostly experimenting around creating Ghost Boy's form.
Mm.
There's something.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something that sort of struck me when we were looking through the concept art that you'd made for Ghost Boy, and also Void of Memory just comes up as well, is that, there were some concept illustrations of people playing with this device, or perhaps similar devices, or maybe they're the devices depicted in Void of Memory, but they have a kind of they have a kind of utopian quality to them. Like, there is something nice about this. They look like visions of someone playing with something totally new, totally different. I mean, is that intentional, or is that something that I'm just reading into it, or like?
Yeah, so I definitely wanted it to be kind of happy, I guess. Yeah, it's I guess yeah. So it was mostly like, I guess it sort of worked into this larger aspect of the overall Ghost Boy story, where this is something that's happening kind of outside of what you see in the game, where Ghost Boy is a toy that's trapped in someone's home. But the illustrations were supposed to show like a nice kind of nostalgic, rosy view of this retro futurist world where Ghost Boy would be played by some kid. So it was kind of, so it was supposed to be happy.
Mm.
Do you have a sort of a vision of where you'd like, as this game, grows and develops, if it like where you would like it to be, where you would like people to be playing Ghost Boy, and what that would be like?
Oh, that's a really good question, because I've kind of, I sort of struggle with this, because sometimes all control games are really only accessible at certain venues or at certain times, and the whole pandemic situation shut that down for a bit. And hopefully things are going to open up soon. But I kind of struggle with this, where I sort of want the story and the characters to be accessible to everyone. So I kind of have. I like having at least an aspect of it to be digital and viewable by people who want to see it. But otherwise, I don't really know. I like the feeling of showing it at venues, even though, some people might have negative experiences. I kind of like this idea of having a controller that, maybe people can play from home, or it's a controller that can be paired with a more, well-known platform, and then the game can be played using that eventually. But it's definitely something which I'm thinking about. But for now, I kind of, like when I'm working on my all control games, the first and foremost use is, okay, this is going to be at an installation somewhere, and it's got to be durable for that. But one day it would be cool to like make a controller which people can just, play at home. So,
because time is running, you did stuff after 2018. You also have new stuff. One of them is, do we have time for? Yeah. So quickly, one of it is Say No More. It's a game you made last year. During the pandemics, actually.
Yeah. So Say No More. I've got to clarify. I did not make the game Say No More. Say No More it was a game made by a small studio in Germany. I think it was Studio Fisbin, and they commissioned me to create an alt controller for them, which would be used during live streams and during shows. But then the pandemic happened, and that shut down. But hopefully they'll be able to show their game at conventions again one day. Basically I made a controller for them. It mimicked this tape recorder that was sort of a key device in the game, and players could turn this tape recorder around to say no in a variety of different ways. It had a little accelerometer in there, and it was powered by an Arduino, and they could just like plug it into their computer, and they could just like rotate the controller to say no in a variety of ways. Because in the game Say No More, you can the idea is to stand up for yourself and say no to people who try and push you over. So you can say no using a variety of ways and a variety of tones.
Yeah, it was the controller. Sorry for that. And very recently, I guess, you made Camaraderie Park. I love the design of this one. It's beautiful. Again, the Julia aesthetic, the Makivic aesthetic. I don't have a clear name for that. I'll let you know when I choose one. But it's beautiful. Maybe you can tell us a bit about this.
Yeah, so it was a game that I made for the neighborhood game jam, which was like a game jam for like wholesome emotional games. And it lasted over 2 weeks, and I just made this very short point-and-click adventure game about this girl who visits this fortress on top of in this city, but the fortress is also like a venue for other things. Like it was based off of a real place called Kalamegdan in Belgrade, and like Kalamegdan is a big fortress. It used to be. But now it's kind of like a very nice public park. It's got cafes, restaurants, a random dinosaur park for children, which developed a few years ago. But it's also got a zoo and also among like a few other things there. So it's very nice, a very cool place to visit. And it's sort of got a lot of history because it's got all these tunnels underneath that were developed at various times. And there are always these urban legends of children wandering off and going missing and never coming out. But it's also got, monuments to various, I guess, to various historical events that happened in the city. So it's kind of like a very cool place with a lot going on. And that's kind of, the game was inspired by that. This main character goes to visit this place and, visits a temple, a holographic spirit park, and amongst other things. So it was supposed to be kind of cozy like that and embody that happy memory.
That's interesting. We didn't mention that with Alistair prior to the show, because with Alistair we talk about the show before the show, obviously. Yeah. And but did in any way Belgrade and the country Serbia influence your work somehow, the culture, or not at all, except for Camaraderie Park, of course?
I mean, sometimes, yeah. Like, it's always in the back of my mind because I grew up in the diaspora. So it was always something which I kind of felt connected to, but far away from at the same time. And it's sort of, like you grow up as an immigrant kid and sometimes you feel like you don't necessarily belong to like any one side, the place that you grew up in or your culture. So sort of like a way for me to understand myself and where I came from. But it's kind of like, it's always sort of at the at the back of my mind. So it definitely influences a lot of my games, even if it doesn't necessarily directly influence them, if that makes sense.
Celia in the chat is telling you, like, connection and disconnection is something you mentioned right at the beginning of the show. So it's no surprise. And just something else on Camaraderie Park. The device is wearable, right?
So Camaraderie Park has several things, right? Okay, so so there's a digital game, Camaraderie Park, where you can just play it. But then there is another one, another like little experiment where. Okay, so here, let me backtrack a little bit. I'm sorry. So there's the visual novel Camaraderie Park that I made for that neighborhood game jam, and that's just like a standalone digital piece. And then there's like a Camaraderie Park wearable, or like actually made a couple of them. But basically, it's this thing where players. So it was sort of this just this prototype that I made, but players can chat with a bot on Facebook Messenger, and the bot asks them questions, and then they can answer the bot using by selecting one of 4 answers as its option, and then the bot sends that answer to a database, an Airtable database somewhere, and then the results from that database are sent to this interactive sculpture, this internet-connected sculpture. And then the content on the structure changes on the sculpture changes according to the answers that are in that database.
That's cool. Like, it's not your first wearable device, though maybe the first game wearable device, but you did a bunch of wearable stuff before. I'm thinking about a project. I think it was a student project, Light Up Shoes.
Yes, my first ever project.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, so we have in exclusivity like images of Julia's Makivic first project with wearable electronics.
Yes, yes.
So I'm showing this on screen right now. We've got your the light up shoes.
It's high heels with LEDs.
Yes.
And it was made with sweat, maybe tears, but sweat for sure.
Yeah, so it was like, okay, so it was my first ever electronics project, and, you know, I was a novice, so I didn't know what neopixels were, right? So I was just trying to solder a bunch of these, like, LED lights, like these RGB LED lights together on a perf board, and it was just a disaster. Nothing was working. Horrible. And then I learned about neopixels, and everything was that much easier. And yeah. Yeah. So I actually, there is another shoe project in the works, but that I have nothing to show for that just yet. It's going to be a few months, but I'm working on an interactive shoe project. So
I want to see this. You also work on one of the wearable, and it was actually for the Milan Fashion Week. So when I saw this, that's classy. And it's on your portfolio. This one is. So maybe you can tell us a bit about this, even if it's not actually a game, right?
Yeah, no, it's not a game. Yeah, it's not a game. What it is it's an inductive charging circuit. So I was working with this artisanal leather crafter who was going to show this during Milan Design Week, and then the pandemic happened, and then yeah. But yeah, so she's an artisanal leather designer, and she wanted to create this smart purse where you could just power your phone through inductive charging and not have to deal with this bulky power brick. So my part involved designing the inductive charging circuit and also designing a special LiPo battery, like a custom LiPo battery with, I think, a very, very low thickness, which is like, I think the battery itself ended up being like 1 millimeter in thickness, but have about like 2,500 milliampere hours of capacity. So it was like quite powerful. So it could hold a lot of power for a long time. And yeah, it ended like the circuit itself ended up working, but we were never actually able to design the bag with the battery in it, unfortunately. Yeah.
And yeah, the pandemics forces most of us to do more things online and less physical. Which leads me not so smoothly to the final project, if I can call it quite smoothly.
Yes.
So not long ago, you did a show that was amazing. It not intended, actually, I swear. So at the Amaze Festival, you had this live stream during which you decided to cannibalize Void of Memory to make a new game live based also on suggestions of the audience. I loved it. So I know there were some technical difficulties, but the idea itself and the show was amazing. Maybe you can tell us a bit about the idea behind this.
Okay, so basically the real driving idea behind it was that I ended up moving countries, and Void of Memory ended up getting destroyed in the process. The case just ended up getting, fractured, and I was like, oh, this is sad. I'm gonna have to glue it all together again. Oh no. But then I was like, okay. I saw that Amaze was still, accepting submissions, and I was like, you know what? Let's make something out of this. Like, what if I had an interactive live stream where people told me how to rebuild Void of Memory, and then I submitted it, and it got in, and it didn't go as planned. But basically, that's sort of like. That's really the only driving factor behind it. Was like, okay, I could just reglue the thing with super glue, but maybe there is something more interesting that can be done with this.
Yeah, that's really nice. Like, you took the opportunity instead of being sad and building it again. You decided to take this opportunity to do something new with it. And the idea was really nice. I enjoyed watching the show. So yeah, there were difficulties, but whatever, it was fun. People can see some videos from some extracted videos from this show. It's online, by the way, if people want to see it.
I mean, I would like to ask, because I find the concept of this really interesting, of kind of crowdsourcing the kind of creativity. I mean, obviously it's unfortunately like the stream didn't work out on the day, but like the vision of it is fantastic. I mean, do you have a vision for what you think, could this grow into something that is perhaps bigger? Is there a vision for what this kind of crowd-controlled electronics could be?
That's a really good question, and I hadn't actually thought of it, because usually when it comes to my things, I often view myself as a solo creator, and I tend to, have a lot of trouble of letting go of control. So sometimes, just the very idea of introducing other people into something is just, but that's not a good thing. I should definitely, it's something which I should work on. But I definitely think that in this age where you have a lot of embedded technologies and these systems which can communicate autonomously with each other, or that can kind of easily share signals and send data with one another, that there's definitely a venue, like a way to design this long distance alt control game where people can control maybe a single controller through a distance. And I think that definitely is interesting, and something that we didn't necessarily, that wasn't as easy to do before. So
yeah, there were some attempts at this during the pandemics, which were interesting. Here, what you did specifically, I don't know if these were suggestions, but this idea of a democratic design, I don't know if we can call it that way, was really interesting. I'd love to see more exploration of this in the future. Not necessarily from you, but if you feel like it, of course, I'd be happy to watch another stream of this. But we will see something else. You prepare something for us to show us before we let you introduce this part. I'm keeping the mystery. I'm trying to be mysterious here, okay?
All right.
So, Alistair, would you like to introduce the creative game and the words and how the words will do stuff?
Yes, I will be delighted to. So, yes, regular viewers of this show will remember that we have a game that we like to play with our guests. What we do is, at the end of the show, we are going to ask Julia to come up with a concept, a new concept for a brand new game or controller. What is this controller going to be made from? Objects suggested by you, the audience. So I'm going to turn on this little bot here, and that means that from now on, if you type anything that begins with an exclamation mark into the chat, then it will be added to the pool of objects that Julia is going to be asked to make a game from. So if you type in, for example, exclamation mark potato, then a potato will go into the pool. And if you type exclamation mark walrus on a jet ski, then a walrus on a jet ski will go onto the pool. So at the end of the show, the bot is going to pick 5 random items from the pool, and Julia, your task will be to come up with a new creation that will use them. So let's have these suggestions in. Julia, do you think you can stand up to the challenge?
I think so. I'm ready.
I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with. And we've already had a sponge has been added to the pool, so keep those ideas coming in.
Sponge, okay.
And while people are suggesting words, we will have the show and tell part of this show. So this is a part where, when we invite our guests to show us something they've been working on live on camera or while sharing their screen. You will do both because you are that amazing. So please tell us about your ongoing project.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So before I begin, I just need to, for the sake of time, about how much time do I have left?
You got
take your time. Well, yeah, 10 if you want, 12 minutes if you want. Take your time.
Okay. Cool. In that case, I will just quickly share my screen because I have a little presentation, but I can go through it fast.
Yeah, no hurry.
Take your time. There is absolutely no hurry.
All right. Okay. All right. Are you all able to see it?
Yep. We can see that.
All right. Cool. So I would like to introduce everyone to a current work in progress. It's my next all-controller game, and this is the one that I would like to develop a little bit further. So, as I said, still very much in progress, doesn't even have a name. It's called the Untitled Brick Game for now. And you'll find out why. So yeah, I'll just, as I said, I'll just be showing you a little snapshot of creating an alternative controller, the inside of the alternative controller, because I don't have a case yet, and just some ideas for characters and brainstorming for the story, and maybe a little bit of how I balance between technical and creative things. So basically, the underlying concept of this game is that there is an ancient spirit trapped inside of a brick, and the spirit needs to reach key points in time in order to escape. And this brick is very, very old, and it's used in various, and it appears in the foundation of various buildings over time, as one building is demolished and another is built, and you get to see all this happen in the game. But the spirit is trapped inside it the whole time, and the player controls the movement of time in the game by moving around the brick. And they also use the orientation of the brick in order to solve spatial puzzles. And the design of this brick is inspired by artifacts found at the Lepenski Vir excavation site in Serbia. It's at this area that borders Romania, and the river Danube runs along the border. And they excavated this site like in the 60s, and there were a bunch of these very strange but detailed statues found from an ancient civilization that lived there about 8,000 years ago. And this is what they looked like. So yeah, these are these little dudes with eyes. And I kind of liked how they looked. So I wanted to design an alt controller out of them. And that brick in the middle that's blue is kind of what I want my brick design to be. So that's kind of, the vibe that I'm going for, but it might change over time. But the idea is that the spirit is trapped in this very elaborately engraved brick that moves from one building through the next. So just some technical details about this game. It's a wireless controller which sends sensor data to a web page using WebSockets. It uses a Raspberry Pi Model 3B+, a LIS3DH accelerometer, which tracks the orientation along the X, Y, and Z axes, and it also includes a few vibration motors for haptic feedback. And the web page itself is hosted on the Raspberry Pi. I use the P5, creative coding library. I use this software called Balena, which lets me remotely deploy new code to the Raspberry Pi. Full disclosure, I do work for that company, and I am doing this project as like one of my first projects for the company, but that's and then I'm using also GPIO, and there's inductive charging here with a lot of question marks, because I want all these all these technical things in order to be encased in this brick. And I want the brick to look like a brick. I don't want there to be any holes for ports or anything like that. I want it to be like a whole, immersive experience. So part of the reason the way I thought I would power it was that I would have a LiPo battery attached to everything. And then the LiPo battery would be powered through inductive charging, and that has just not worked for a variety of reasons. But yeah, it's kind of a struggle that I'm having right now. So if anyone has any suggestions, I'm all ears. But that's just where I'm at. So, all right, sorry. Yeah, and so here's moving on. For the digital game itself, as I mentioned, there's going to be a lot of moving elements, kind of like I'll show you in the demo, but you will be able to control the rate at which things move with this controller. So I wanted to have a bunch of layers that are kind of messy, but that look good layered on top of one another. So I sort of wanted, this is the illustration, this is sort of like the artistic feel of the game. So this is just some concept art for that. And so some sources of inspiration, some Slavic mythology, yeah, I'm not really sure. I haven't really fleshed out the characters yet, but they will be inspired by these deities. Triglav, like a warrior god who has 3 heads and is easily affected by human sin. And 3 goddesses, Mokosh, Morena, Vesna, who are kind of like the major female deities and sort of exist along a spectrum where Vesna is like the good one who represents like spring and fertility and life, and Morena being the bad one who is like winter and death and darkness, and then Mokosh is like somewhere in the middle and the most mysterious of them all. So I want to have a character that embodies all 3 in some way. And then the third one is the Domovoi, which are these very friendly like household spirits which take care and protect the home. And that's kind of what I want the spirit in the brick to be, sort of like this very friendly spirit that's trapped and that can only exist in buildings that are still used and still alive. So it needs to move from one building to another that's being occupied by humans in order to survive. And and then finally, as an inspiration for a town, I kind of was inspired by this place called Sokobanya in Serbia, which is like a touristy mountain town that's known for having these healing baths and mountains and nature. And amongst other things, it's also got a lot of like medieval fortresses and brutalist buildings in varying states of use, with some of them being well preserved and other just kind of like being left alone to sort of fall apart. And it kind of is like a cool cross section of history and the effects of modernity and industrialization on the area. And yeah, just in terms of like a source of inspiration for historical buildings and and things changing over time, it's a cool place. So I sort of based it off of that. All right, and this is just like some little snapshots of the town. This is like one area of the bath. It's got a lot of 70s like sort of brutalist inspired architecture. This is the fortress on top of a mountain. It's kind of like high up and sort of hard to reach. This is the outside of the bathhouse, and And so with that being said, it's demo time.
Woo!
All right. So I'll quickly show you the demo. It's very much a work in progress, so there's not much to it. Can everyone still see my screen?
We can still see your screen, yep.
Yeah.
All right, give me 1 second.
No
okay.
worries.
Yeah, everything's fine. All right, cool. So, so do you see me holding up this Raspberry Pi?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
All right, cool. So yeah, that's a shield. It's got this is the accelerometer, and these are the vibration motors for haptic feedback. So let me explain what's going on the screen. So I'm rotating this accelerometer along the X, Y, and Z axes, and I use this rotation to determine the rate at which the frames change. So the sort of cat-like character to the right is being controlled by changes in the Y-axis. So it spins really, really fast if I tilt one way, and then it tends to go back and be quite slow if I tilt the other way. Sometimes it takes a while to catch up, especially when I'm streaming. So, but yeah, as you can see, there are changes in the speed. And to the other side, I've got these shapes, which I'm trying to align, and they look like patterns from traditional Slavic embroidery. When all of these elements, patterns are combined, they represent the shape for ancestors.
Right.
And it's very much still a demo, so I haven't really gotten a chance to align them properly yet, but the idea is that I'm supposed to rotate these axes until they do align, and then that causes the level to change. And changes in the X rotation affect how fast this character is running at the bottom, and changes in the Y-axis affect the speed at which the sort of the background animation changes. So yeah, right now I'm just experimenting with changes in rotation and frame rate and making these spatial puzzles with like the embroidery shapes. And that's kind of, that's pretty much where it is now. The black rectangles with the blue text show the data that's coming in from the accelerometer. Oh yeah, and also the speeds from the rotations of the Y-axis affect the speed of the cat-like character. But then when the cat-like character reaches certain speeds, it sends data back to these vibration motors, and then they vibrate based off of how fast the character is going. So that's that's what I've got right now.
Wow.
That's so cool. Like people love the art style in the chat, and not only in the chat, like here in my flat too. So
yeah, same here.
Also, someone is saying that someone is currently working with inductive charging in an alt control game, and your call for like joint forces on this problem has been heard in the chat.
Oh, amazing. Let me know how it's going for you, because it's been a journey so far.
But I mean, I do love
looking forward.
Tatiana, were you about to ask something? Or? No? Okay, so no, I was going to say, like, I love the idea of, when you got the inductive charging, meaning that you can contain the whole thing inside this brick without any wires coming out of it. And I can imagine that really kind of helping the illusion that this is, that this is an enchanted brick. And that, like, I think that illusion is quite, I always find it quite interesting, that kind of element of make-believe that comes into a lot of alt control games, because, you're asking someone to step away from the screen where everything's represented pictorially and into something which you hold in your hand, and there's a lot of room for imagination. And I'm curious, like, what is your, do you feel like you have a sort of a relationship with the kind of make-believe aspect of creation, or, I wish I could articulate my question better.
I guess, I kind of want, so in this case, because I feel like I don't have a lot to work with, right? I just have this one controller. I want it to be as seamless as possible and to be as smooth as possible. And the reason, I guess, why I would like that is because I think it would be the most enjoyable playing experience where you've got this weird brick and you're just twisting it around, trying to align things. And I know something about it just feels very simplistic, and just having the focus be on one object and not necessarily the rest of the environment around you, which is what a lot of my other installations have been like, where they've been more they've been larger with a bigger emphasis on the surrounding environment. I just want to focus on this one simple interaction that would be which would seem simple at first, but be more evocative later, as you kept using it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. I guess you kind of, as you experience it, you build a relationship with it. Is that right? Yeah, kind of. Actually, it's sort of the more you, I guess it's the kind of thing where the more you do it, the more meaning it adopts. It's sort of, I was actually really inspired by If Found, where it's a really, really powerful story, but the interaction is so simple. You're just kind of erasing things over and over again. But as you delve deeper into the story, the meaning of erasing everything just becomes more and more powerful, and right. The interaction just
makes more sense. This is kind of what I wanted to accomplish with this.
I see. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I really like that direction. It feels very evocative. I mean, it feels, I mean, I feel like I can see connections with Ghost Boy here in the sort of, there's a very strong kind of tactile element to it. People are going to be handling this brick, feeling its texture. But also, you talked about, with Ghost Boy, the kind of organic feeling of manipulating the controls. I mean, is the idea of the accelerometer, is that the accelerometer should be kind of an organic set of movements for the same kind of reasons?
Yeah. Yeah, because it's a kind of movement which like plays well into the form factor of the brick, because the accelerometer measures rotation along X, Y, and Z axes, as well as like the orientation and inclination of the sensor. So it's sort of like if you've got a brick in your hands, it's easy to just kind of move it that way. So it was a sensor which played along well with what I was going for, and in that sense, it's kind of organic, and it's a single input, but it is quite stable. So even though I'm getting I have a whole range of numbers that I can work with, it kind of lets me, I guess, have a wider tool set of how I can affect things on the screen, and it's a little bit deeper than just like, oh yeah, press this button. But I kind of like that. It gives that added layer of complexity while still being pretty simple and predictable, which was important to me.
That makes sense. Do you have a vision for like what materials you're going to use to make the brick itself?
Probably clay foam. Okay. So the outside will definitely be clay foam, which hardened over time, and then the inside will most likely be some plywood, maybe cardboard.
Is clay foam, is that the same material that you've been using to make the exteriors of, I'm forgetting the name of it, the Camaraderie Park?
Camaraderie Park.
Is it the same material as that?
No, Camaraderie Park was made using polymer clay, which, if I'm being honest, it's definitely, it takes a while to learn how to use really well, and I'm honestly just not there yet. But I find that clay foam was a little bit more user-friendly. I actually used it to make the spikes on the Ghost Boy case.
Oh, right.
Mm.
So yeah, so it's like, I don't know, I found that it was just a little bit an easier material, which was lighter than polymer clay, which is important, but also I think less fragile. So yeah, it's like a lot of cosplayers like it for building swords and things like that that are light but have a good structure still.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. I mean, how did you discover these materials? Because I confess they're not things that I've heard of before myself.
So mostly through just sometimes like research, I guess, just looking at sculptors that I like and what they made. To just other people at Goldsmiths were making things out of silicone, for example. So I learned from them, and also, like, sometimes when I'm on Facebook, I'll get these videos from artists making dolls out of polymer clay, or like modding Barbies using polymer clay and various tools. So I was like, this could be fun. So yeah, so that's kind of how I learned about them.
That's really interesting. I mean, it sounds like a very versatile material. And I guess
it's hard to deal with this and silicone, like it's so unforgiving. I say, like, especially silicone for other reasons, for the bubbles. Like if you have any air in the silicone and everything is perfectly fine, but by the end you will have these all hollows inside whatever you did. That's like, and you have to do it all over again. But polymer clay is also hard to actually control as a material. That's brave of you.
Yeah, it's getting it to be smooth is surprisingly difficult. It's like it's there's definitely quite a lot of skill involved, and yeah.
We do have one question come through in the chat, which is if you ever encountered Phoenix Perry while you were at Goldsmiths.
Yes, of course. Yeah. I took her approaches to play class, and we stayed in touch afterwards. So yeah.
Excellent. We've got
Phoenix
is Phoenix.
Phoenix is a game designer and artist, because maybe not everyone in the viewers know. And she was the first guest we had on that show. It was like, I don't know, 7 or 8 months ago, something like this.
Yep.
Amazing work. You should definitely check what she's doing.
I agree.
Yeah. Phoenix is awesome. Yeah.
I think, though, we are starting to near closing time for the show, which means I think it is time for us to move on to the game.
Yeah.
Are you feeling ready? Are you being? Do you feel prepared? Do you feel creative?
I think I'm prepared. Yes.
Excellent. So, while we've all been chatting, our viewers have been adding many objects to the pool, and thank you very much, audience. You have sent in a veritable barrage of mystery objects.
Okay.
So your task will be to the bot is going to pick 5 of them, and your task, Julia, will be to come up with a new game or a new controller made using these objects. So you'll have time to bounce ideas around. You can bounce them around with us, Tatiana.
And by the end, we need a pitch. We need a pitch for the game.
Okay.
So you have got some time to bounce ideas around, think aloud. You can, bounce ideas off of us if you like. But after 5 minutes, we want your pitch. So, are you ready?
Okay. I'm ready.
Then I am about to reveal your 5 objects are a shopping list, coffee, shellfish, jeans, and sunglasses.
Okay.
So that was shopping list.
So...
Oh, can you remember all of them? Or can you see them on screen?
Yeah.
Super.
So it's like we've got a shopping list, shellfish, sunglasses, jeans.
Yep.
And coffee.
Well done.
All right. Okay. Interesting. So first of all, what is on the shopping list? Do I know?
That's for you to decide.
Okay. Interesting. All right. So the coffee. Is coffee conductive? Like, sometimes people will put, pin wires to potatoes and then make music with them. So
I guess it depends how strong you make the coffee.
Yeah. or whether it's liquid.
Yeah.
In liquid form or ground coffee form. Okay, so it's okay. So for this exercise, the coffee is going to be a cappuccino now. Hope that's all good, because that's my favorite coffee drink. A little cappuccino with a heart on it. So that's that's what we've got going. Okay. So, Oh, okay.
It's not an easy
list. Yeah, so I'm kind of thinking of an idea where maybe it's a game where you spill the coffee all over your clothes, your jeans, and maybe that triggers something, right? And then, you have to work really hard to spill the coffee all over yourselves in order to activate some sensors. Okay. But then the sunglasses come in. So that's another interesting wearable. I wonder if the sunglasses could I wonder if so they can alter how you see things. So I wonder I don't know, maybe there's some screen over them or something that changes according to the heat from the coffee, which it picks up from your jeans, and that affects your view. So that could be something. Now, finally, we've got, oh my God, okay, what if there's a shopping list, right? That's written in a kind of ink that can only be seen through a certain filter, and their glasses change according to the heat from the coffee. So then, you know, so then like whatever, so whatever happens to your glasses affects what you see on the list, if that makes sense. And then you have to go buy it. All right. Okay. And then finally the shellfish. Okay. I mean, I don't know if this is, I've heard somewhere that there are certain kinds of shrimp, the rainbow shrimp, which can see up to like way more colors than humans, right? Like up to 17 million. No, even more than that. I'm not sure exactly what the numbers, but they can definitely see more colors than humans.
Right.
And I wonder if this applies to all
mantis shrimp. Yeah.
Ah, okay. Yeah. But they're quite beautiful, aren't they? Like nice and colorful.
They're absolutely beautiful, yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, going back to our shellfish, right? I don't know if this rule applies to all shellfish. For the sake of this exercise, I'm going to say that it does. You'll have your little shellfish friends, which tells you, like, maybe the glasses maybe the items on the shopping list can only are written in some color that we can't see. So if your glasses can't fully see what's on the list, you have your little shellfish friend, which tells you what it is.
Okay. Oh, okay.
No,
yeah.
No.
There was a lot to picture there.
Yeah, sorry.
It was like my brain was still processing.
Okay, wait, let me backpedal a little bit. Okay, so you've got coffee, which you spill on your jeans.
Yep.
The jeans are connected through some means to the glasses, which have a filter over them. And the filter, I guess, changes colors or changes what spectrum you can see, depending on how strongly you pour the coffee. And then using these glasses, you have to read a shopping list that contains items that are written in some sort of invisible ink that can only be seen under certain spectrums. And the glasses can help you with that. But if you're still struggling with the glasses, you have a little shrimp which whispers what it says to you, because that's how animals work.
Oh, I love that. I mean,
that's so cool.
It's nice that like have a little shrimp on my shoulders, and if anyone asks, I can say I'm playing your game.
Yeah. Because that's like a less of a weird reason than just having a shrimp on your shoulder for fun.
So, I mean, I feel like we've got quite a quite a nice fleshed out concept now. So if I was, let's say I'm an investor, I'm a big billionaire investor, and I've come and I want to invest in some alt controller games, like how would you pitch this to me right now?
Okay. All right, so instead of building a rocket and sending it into space for no reason whatsoever, I have an idea for you.
Well, rockets is kind of passé now.
Just a coincidence, like an example among any other.
So I have this idea where you spill coffee on your pants on purpose.
Oh.
And then your pants are connected to these magic glasses, these magic sunglasses through some means. TBD. Maybe your money will make it happen. But...
I like the sound of using my money. I do have a lot of it.
Yeah. So depending on how hot your coffee is, the shades on the glasses will change so that you can only see a certain spectrum of colors. But then get this, you also have this shopping list that you have to read using these glasses. And if you do a really good job of spilling coffee on yourself, you will be able to read this list very, very well. But if you're still struggling because you have bad aim or something, there's this little shrimp which like rests on your shoulder, and because it can see a wider spectrum of light than humans can, it reads the items on the list to you and then sings them to you like Sebastian from The Little Mermaid.
Well, I have to say, as a millionaire, I am always looking for new experience, new reasons to pour hot beverages over myself. So this is brilliant. I think I'm going to have to invest all of my money in it right away. Does it have a name though?
Oh, okay. Damn, that's hot.
Oh, damn, that's hot.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, Alistair Corp is going to be pledging all of its money into Damn That's Hot, and I can't wait to play it. Thank you very much.
I'm glad.
Was really fun.
Amazing. Yeah.
I think you did a really good job with that, and thank you very much, audience, for sending in some wonderful and very challenging ideas.
Yeah, thanks. That was fun to work with.
So I think, Tatiana, have you been working on an illustration of this behind the scenes?
I'm doing my best, but like, come on, look at what I had to work with. I'm trying to edit a mantis shrimp right now. Okay. I never done that before. Never thought I would. But yeah, after the show, I'll try to put something on Twitter.
Oh.
Yeah. So do keep an eye
on I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, me too.
So do keep an eye on our Twitter streams at MechBird for Tatiana's stream to see what our realization of your idea looks like. It's so quick from concept to finished reality purchasable product in under 10 minutes is pretty good. But I'm afraid this does mean that we are now reaching time to finish the show.
Do we have some questions from the viewers, maybe in the chat?
Yep. Hello, I disappeared for a second.
That's okay. You're back. That's what matters.
That's okay. And I think we don't have any question. Julia, did you? No, that was already asked. So, Julia, is there anything you'd like to add before we head off?
Just thank you so much for having me here. This was amazing. This was awesome. I really enjoyed myself, and this was really fun. So thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for coming.
It was a pleasure.
Where should we go if we want to find out more about you and your work?
Oh, for sure. So I have my Twitter handle, which is just at @Makivic. So it's JMAKIVIC. And
as written on the screen right now. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. And then there's also my Instagram where I post in progress things like my art and stuff. And then I forget what else I put in there, but there's also my portfolio website, juliamakivic.com. And that's, like I don't update that one as often, but it's got all my projects on there, like my big ones at least. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, before we head off, we've got a few announcements of what's coming up next on the IndieCade channel. So thank you very much, of course, for watching and joining in. And there will be more Beyond Screens every Wednesday night here on the IndieCade channel. So the fourth Wednesday of the month is the Alt Controller show with Tatiana and myself. But there's also playable theatre, escape rooms, and come out and play segments each week. So tune in at 12 noon Pacific time every Wednesday for more fantastic stuff about games beyond the screen. Tonight, later this afternoon, at 3 o'clock Pacific, we have Korean Drive Time. And then at 6 o'clock, Zach is going to be giving us some monster card reading. So if you want yourself a tarot card reading with some strange and whimsical monster creations, then tune in then for that. And finally, no, that was the and finally. I swear I'm going to one of these weeks I'm going to get this absolutely on the money, but unfortunately it wasn't this week. But yes, here's our schedule, and please do.
It's funny you're that way.
Yeah. Please do tune in for more fantastic stuff here at the IndieCade channel.
Thank you so much, Julia, for joining us. It's been fantastic to have you here. Thanks again.
And thank you so much.
And thank you once again, Tatiana, for another fantastic show.
Thank you, Alistair.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.
See you later.
Bye.
See you all again.